The following is an interview with Sam B Lifshutz of San Antonio, Texas. The interview is taking place in Mr. Lifshutz's apartment on November 25th, 1973. The interviewer is Ellen Robinson Epstein of the Center for Oral History in Washington, D.C. Okay, for the record, could you just state your name?
My name is Sam B Lifshutz, I guess you know.
And is Sam your full name?
Yeah.
And what does the B stand for?
But that my father's name was Ben. My God, that's why I put it B. Well, the purpose of putting that B, I never used the middle name before I came here. Because they used to mix up, there was another two family Lifshutzes in San Antonio. And the bank used to mix up our records. You see? I remember one time, I was sure that I have enough money in the bank. And one time the check came back. And when I went to question about it, then they found out that the other Lifshutz, it was also a Sam Lifshutz in San Antonio. And they mixed up the records. And then another thing, I sold the property to a person, and it shows a judgment that I had. And I had to clear the judgment. So I knew that I didn't have no judgments. So I went and looked up the other fellow whose name is Sam Lifshutz. And I took him in my car and went down. It was Howell Brothers, a wholesale merchant. And I proved that this is the one that has the judgment, not me. So they had to clear it, otherwise I had to pay off.
Right.
You see, that's then since that time I put in a B in my name.
Right. So when were you born?
In 1893.
And where were you born?
I was born in a little town in Ukraine, Russia.
Do you remember the name of the town?
Yeah, Lofitz.
Can you spell that?
I think it's Loffic. Lofitz. It's Poltava State.
What state?
Poltava.
Poltava
State. And my father was a grain dealer.
What was his name?
His name is Ben. It was in Jewish, they call it Bear. Ben. And
what did grain dealers do?
Oh yeah, we used to have on the highway a store. We used to buy grain from the peasants that came in to town to sell. Like we had every week they had a market, and they used to sell the grain, and we used to buy the grain, and then we load them up in trains, and ship them to Poltava, to the main place where they used to load the grain. And let's see what else to say.
What was your mother's name?
Chaya.
And do you know what her maiden name was?
Chaya Rabinovitz.
And where was she from?
She was, I don't exactly remember where she was born. Well, she was in in Ukraine also. I think she was born in a city, Roman. In Russian, they call it Romney.
Did you
it's
ever
a
know
bigger town. We lived in a smaller town. It's called Loffice.
I'm going to ask you about that in a minute.
Near Romney. Romney was a bigger city, like San Antonio and New Braunfels, you see.
Right. Do you remember your grandparents?
No.
None of them?
No.
Do you know where they were from?
No.
And did your mother and father ever talk about their parents?
No, not what I remember.
Okay,
I know. See, we were a family. We wasn't a very religious people. I remember, in some houses you see the father used to pray, Tillim, Tillim. And my father never seen him praying. He used to read Russian magazines. I remember even the name. It happened something that I remember when I was a kid. I remember, and things that happened last week I forget.
What was the name of the magazine?
Niva.
What does that mean in English?
Niva. I read Niva. I don't remember exactly the meaning. It's just a name.
Well, was it like
Niva.
Time magazine, or was it more like a news magazine?
Yeah, a news magazine. They used to get it, I think, every month. That magazine. He used to read it. The magazine used to be very like a book. It lasted him for a whole month to read. Not like a weekly magazine. And but his hobby is to daven in a pulpit, like a hasen, at a pulpit. You see, it was like a hobby. He liked it. He used to go there to synagogue every week on a Friday, and actually Saturday. And when I was when I was 13 years old, well, about 12 years old, we took out, then I think the war broke out with Japan and Russia, And I had three brothers. One of them, when he came home, he already served the 4 years in the army. He came home, and then when the war started, broke out, my brother didn't want to go to war, so they found a matchmaker, and they married him real fast. They married him, and he sailed to the United States. While on the way, before he reached, as soon as he passed the border, because he was already notified to drafted, you see, but he was lucky that he already passed the border. So he was the first one. His name is Harry. He was the first one to come to the United States.
Okay, we're going to get to that in a minute. I want to ask you some more questions about Russia. You say the name of the town was Lifshutz?
Lifshutz, yeah.
Do you think, is that where your name came from, Lifshutz? Do you think?
Yeah, I was born there, in Lifshutz.
Yeah, but was your name Lifshutz in
Russia?
Yeah,
in Russia. I didn't change my name.
No, you didn't change it.
No.
And do you know why your father was not very religious?
Why? No, I don't know.
Was your mother religious?
But he used to daven in the morning one time, that's all. But he never, like prayer, did praying. He never did that. And my mother was not too religious either.
Did you all...
We kept kosher, kept kosher. Everybody kept kosher, all the Jews kept kosher. A matter of habit. They say habit is second nature. A matter of habit, he kept kosher. And he davened every morning, and that's all. But he didn't just pray like other people used to pray Tillim, pray for better luck or for health or whatever, anything else.
About how many Jewish people were there in Lifshutz?
Just a few families. About 4 or 5 families.
Do you know what the whole population was, approximately?
No, just, I guess, maybe a few thousand.
And how was it being just among a few families being Jewish?
We lived very happy between all the neighbors. We were very happy.
You weren't afraid?
No, we were very happy. We had over there a police chief in town, and I remember he used to come to visit us a few times a week. And my father used to, discuss with him the world affairs. He was a very nice fellow. We lived very happy there. We didn't have no discrimination.
Did your family celebrate Shabbat and the holidays, Purim?
Yeah. We used to go to a synagogue.
Was
it
synagogue
was walking distance?
In Lifshutz?
Yeah, it was walking. We used to walk to the shul, and we used to celebrate all the holidays. We did.
And your father, do you know how he got into the grain merchant business?
Well, that was already for generations back. His father was also in the same business. He went out from father to son to the children. That's what it. And also his relatives also. My uncle was also in the same business, a grain dealer.
And did they also live in Lifshutz?
Yeah, the same town.
And who did they sell their grain to? The regular townspeople or to bakers?
No, they used to load and ship them by train to a bigger city.
Oh, I see.
You see, to Ramen, that's the bigger city. And from there, they shipped to some other place, and I think, I really don't know where they shipped it.
Did you ever go with your father to get the grain from the peasants?
Yeah, I used to help them.
How did you go?
Well, we mean by horse and wagon.
Is that what you had?
Oh yeah, a horse and wagon. And I remember when I was a little boy, I think maybe 6 or 7, 8 years old, and we were robbed. And I was asleep right in the middle of the night, and we were robbed. And that was, I think, but 2 years before, 2 or 3 years before we were supposed to sail to the United States. But a year ago, we had to get those tickets to be prepared. Everything took about a year. We already had the tickets ready. And then we were robbed the same year, and he caught pneumonia. It was very cold. He caught pneumonia, and he went to the hospital. He think about in a week, he passed away. He died. And after that, we sailed to the United States, my mother and my brother.
Well, I want to find out still more about this Lifshutz. Did you ever hear about pogroms or?
No, I'll tell you, we expected a pogrom.
Why did you expect it?
Because other cities had it. So I'll tell you what my father did. He got together with other businessmen, close. He made a collection, and we sent a telegram and money in advance to the chief of the Cossacks that we want to have a regiment in our town to be protected. And they send him so many rubles, in advance. And then after, they usually a pogrom started in a carnival. Every year they had a carnival, you see.
Why would it start then?
Huh?
Why would it start then?
Because all the Jews used to get together there, and they had a lot of merchandise, and there was something to rob there.
I see.
They used to rob the stores, you see, and then all from the little towns used to come to that carnival to buy and to sell. And usually started at the carnival. And they already noticed, that was happening, and we expect that pogrom in that year. So we made a collection, got together some money, and we mailed some money to the chief of the Cossacks, and they sent in a regiment of the Cossacks to our town. And I remember like it happened yesterday. And I was at that time in that carnival because we used to buy, the grain. That there was a big restaurant, like a tent, they made, temporary. Got in over there, a lot of people were ate over there, and then one of them, there was an organization of those that made the pogroms. You see, it was organized usually. One of them, they came in. Oh, the owner of that restaurant was a Jew. So they had a very good meal, and they start to, and when they had to pay, he hollered, he hollered, "Bei Jidi," kill the Jews. That means in Russian. So they start to confiscate, they start to rob. And so they were stationed, that regiment was stationed right by the block from there, on the lookout. So they notified right away to the chief of the Cossacks, and they caught the man who started the riot. And they tied him up to the tail of the horse, and they dragged him about 5 or 10 blocks, and he was killed. And since that time, the rest of it, kneeled on their knees, and they start to make crosses, to forgive, God forgive them. And that was it. There was no pogrom.
Well, why did you think you could trust the Cossacks? I mean,
well, because they were bought. Graft, was a big deal.
So you were really paying them off to come to your town.
Oh, no, otherwise they would never even come. Sure, we paid them off.
Yeah.
If he wouldn't have sent them the money, he would have a pogrom in our town too, like the rest of them had.
How did you know what was happening in the other towns?
Well, they heard,
Did you have
those
relatives?
news spread very, because it wasn't in let's see, in Poltava there were a few programs. I don't remember the cities, but there were, but not too many. They also did the same thing what we did. And those that neglected to do it, they had pogroms, a lot of them were killed and they're up and everything. So we avoided those pogroms.
After that, did you have to pay off some more?
No, we just paid them. We told them that we're giving you so much and so much for sending them. Half we send them in advance, and the other half after the carnival. Then we knew that it wouldn't start no more, because there wasn't so many people coming in, to start it.
Who was the head of Russia at the time? Do you know?
The Tsar,
Was it
Tsar Nikolai?
Nicholas II?
Yeah, he was the head.
And he was not good to the Jews.
No. Well, the thing is this: he had very little to say. It's all those a lot of them that had influence on him, and he did what they wanted. You see, so they managed. You see, and the blame really wasn't his; it's all his associates had the blame. So those that the graft, all that they had money, can get away with anything. They bought out a lot of graft, like it used to be in Mexico, the same thing, you see. So we lived a pretty good life, I mean.
What kind of man was your father? What do you remember about him?
He was a learned man.
A what?
He was educated. He was learned he was learned actually in Jewish, but more in Russian than Jewish. He liked to read a lot of books and magazines. And he was a very educated man.
And how many children were there in your family?
Well, there's 3 brothers and me. And that's all. Well, she had children, but they passed away years
8 children?
Back. No, she had children, I think 2 or 3 way back that I don't remember that.
And what were your brothers' names?
One of the oldest was Harry. Next one was Sam and Max. And then Dan.
Dan?
Dan. And mine is Sam. I was the baby in the family.
Did your father treat you different from the other brothers?
No. Yeah, 2 brothers served in the army. One of them served in the cavalry. He was a tall, and the other one was in infantry, the oldest one. And they served about in the same time. The last year, the oldest served, I think, 4 years. When he was 3 years served, then they called the other one, the next one.
Was your father a good businessman?
Yeah, he was, actually. He provided, with a living. We weren't wealthy, but we had a comfortable.
What kind of house did you grow up in? Do you remember what it looked like?
It's a pretty good house, yes. It's a concrete, built of concrete, cement floors. And the furniture was it was how you call it? It's like, it was very unusual. It's underneath you put straw, you warm it, and it's real cold. And so then you sleep on it at night, like a bed, like a couch.
But you could heat it from underneath?
Underneath, you heat it with straw.
You don't remember what it was called?
Straight, that was called in Jewish, straight. We mean that was called the heating, you mean?
No, but the whole contraption.
Let's see. Out of my mind. Jelanki was called.
Do you know how that's spelled? That's a Russian word.
Yeah,
Right?
Russian word, Zelanki. Yeah. And that was, they were heated, that gave heat on the whole house.
And who got to sleep there?
And at night, you slept on it. It built from concrete, you see. It was built from concrete. But it's a very wide space that even 4 or 5 people can sleep on it.
Did you and your brothers all sleep there?
Yes. Yeah, and there was another place, let's see. Then we had 2 beds. Yeah, my father and mother slept in the bed, you know. And then we had another bed. Then we had that Zelanki. That was a very wide space that kept warm. We only used it at winter time. It was real cold. Real cold.
What did the rest of the house look like? Did you have a dining room like we know it today? A separate room?
Yeah, a separate room with chairs and tables. We didn't have nothing fancy. We had we hang up clothes, you know.
How did your mother do her cooking?
Well, we had it wasn't exactly like a store, you know. We had what a chont is. They used to cook Friday for Saturday, you see. Also, the stove was made of concrete. There was no stove like in here, made of concrete, you see. And we used to bake our own bread.
Well, did you put wood in this concrete or was it oil?
No, wood. Wood. We use wood and straw for heating. Winter time and in the oven we use wood. But we use in the place where we used to sleep, you know, we use straw. And
what about the other lighting?
With kerosene lamps.
And did you have to go to town to buy kerosene?
No, it was right walking distance. We had stores there. We had 2 stores. We used to buy groceries. You know.
What did the town look like? Was
a small town. It was a small town. It wasn't big.
Was there one main street? Or
yeah, I forgot what the name is. Then we had a nice lake to swim. A beautiful lake, right? Close.
About how many stores on the street?
Stores?
About how many?
Yeah, but no, it was just 2 stores in the little town. That's all. But they were walking distance, one not far from the other. You see, and then the other store they used to ride the horse and wagon to the second store.
Was the street?
One of them was close where we lived. So now then was right shortly after that after my father passed away, we were getting ready to leave. You see, so I remember like we hired a horse and a wagon, of our baggage, to go to the station. We had a station that went from Lofitz to Ramen. Ramen was a city, pretty good sized city. You see, there was the place that we came there by a horse and wagon. Our relatives, the other one, my uncle took us down there, to the station. And from there we went by train.
Well, I don't want to get there just yet. Just wait 1 minute. I want to find out some more about your mother. What kind of person was she?
Well, she was naturally she wasn't a fanatic. She was a religious woman, like the most are, but we had a kosher home all the time, naturally. And she wasn't a fanatic. She was just ordinary woman like others.
Where did
nothing unusual about her. The same average woman, average Jewish woman.
Where did you have to go to get your kosher meat, your chickens?
No, in the same town we had a shechet. Yeah, we had a shechet in the same town.
But there were only 4 or 5 families.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, but they had a shechet. One of them was a shechet, and we had, but they had a lot of children. The families had a lot of children, big families. In other words, we kept up, Well, the services we held it just in a big house. There was no synagogue. You see, it was just a house, a big house that we used to come every Friday night and Saturday.
Did your mother used to make special preparations on Shabbat?
Oh yeah, yeah.
What do you remember about
She used to
Fridays?
bake bread, you know, and that in the oven, you know, in the oven. The same, by the way, but it was the same style oven the bakers use here.
Mm-hmm.
The same style oven.
Mm-hmm.
They have a cholent, you know what the cholent is? Excuse me. When I walk in over here in some bakeries, I see how they put in the bread. That's the style they bake.
What used to happen on a typical Friday, for instance?
Nothing unusual.
Did you, when you came home from school, did you get dressed up?
We went to shul, and after then we walked home, you know. And Saturday there was no commotion, no work done, nothing, because we had a maid, they hired by the year. I remember that.
Why was that you hired?
That was the way it was, you know, the hired by the year. I remember that my older brother, went after one maid got married, we had to look for another one. So he went from there about 10 miles. The horse and wagon, you know, and they went to, he was recommended to a peasant, he had a daughter, you know, and they made a contract to give him so much a year. And he used to come she been with us, but I remember about 7 or 8 years. And every year, whenever there was the carnival, he came to collect the fee, you know.
Well, did that mean
that was the way it was going on, you know.
But did that mean you were pretty well off to have a maid?
No, even the middle class of people had maids, because it was so cheap. It was very reasonable, the maid. I think they pay about $15 a year. And naturally they used to have clothes, you know, food, everything. And every year the parents came to the market and they collected for the daughters, you know, for the daughters' fee.
Did only Jewish merchants participate in the carnival? Or was it everybody in the town?
Oh, some of them Gentiles too, but the most were Jewish. You know, they had like groceries. In Russian they say bakalena. Bakalena Torgovia, that means the grocery store. But in our town were mostly grain dealers. See, there was a center where all the peasants brought in the products to sell.
And what time of year was the carnival?
Well, I think it was the carnival, I don't remember exactly. It wasn't too cold. I think it was about October, November. About October, I think.
And did you go to school?
Oh yeah, I went to two schools. To a Malam, you know, Jewish, I had a cheder. I didn't go to a cheder, it wasn't because it was so small. But I had a Malamed is a teacher. He used to give me lessons in Hebrew. And then I went to a Russian school. But I had only but 2 or 3 years I went to school, the Russian school, part-time. Part-time I was, learning Jewish, how to read and write, and then I went to Russian school.
Well, what would you do on a typical day when you were about 8 years old?
Oh, I was playing, you know, like people do here, swimming. They had entertainment in the little town too.
But you didn't go to school for more than 3 years.
Oh yeah, we went to school.
No, but you said you only went for 2 or 3 years.
No, I mean in the Russian school. I went to.
But you were going to the Malamed.
The Jewish, yeah, the Jewish. He used to come giving like private lessons. But in the Russian school there was a group, you know, a regular school. In the Russian school.
When did you start helping your father out in business?
This it was, I think, it was about 10 years, no, maybe before, but 8 or 10 years old. I used to come there.
Were your brothers also working
Yeah,
with your father?
yeah, that's right. I had two brothers working, and then they went to the army. You know, it was just after that, after they came back from the army.
Do you have any particular memories about home life or your mother or anything you used to do when you were a child that
No,
was
not exactly.
any?
I remember one thing that I remember that I couldn't forget. When my brother came from the army, after he served the army, he got him a partner, a very religious man, you know, very religious man. They called him Yanko. And they opened up a branch also on the highway to buy from, you know, like we had, another place, you see. So one brother was with us, and one brother made partnership with another man, a religious man. See, before he used to be like work on commission basis to get so much. But then he made a partnership with that man, that religious man, with my brother. So then my brother used to tell my father that he doesn't like him, the partner. Why? He says he's a thief, the religious man. He said whenever a peasant came to sell his grain, first of all, he said he took out some whiskey and made him drunk. And after that man already was tipsy, that he already half drunk, you see, he started to weigh his grain. And then every sack that he put in a place, you know, he used to mark down with chalk, you see. And whenever he turned around, he erased some numbers over there. So it came out less. See? He said he's a cheater. He was cheating the peasants, and he didn't like it. So he told my father, he bawled him out, he says, you better pray less and be an honest man. He says, God don't want you to cheat. He said, but he says, a goy, he says, a Christian is a mitzvah
Is
to
a
cheat.
what? A mitzvah?
It's a mitzvah to cheat, because they hate us. You see? He said, no, he says, to cheat, it doesn't make a difference who it is. It's an avera, it's a sin to cheat people. And he took him out. He says, no more. And he was saying, he thought that when he's a religious man and they don't like Jews, so he's, you know, he can cheat anybody, all the Gentiles. He said it's a sin anyhow, whoever. He's not honest, he's not honest anyhow.
So this was your brother who had already come back from the army?
Yeah.
Was that Harry?
Yeah, that Harry, the oldest one.
And he was in for 3 years? Is that what you said?
No, he served 3 years. No, he served 4 years. Well, he was 3 years, then they drafted another one. The next one, he was in the cavalry. They served both 1 year together.
What did your parents think about their children having to go into the army?
No, it was a natural thing. No,
Everybody
there was
did
a lot of Jews. Yeah, they didn't, because some Jews bought themselves out. Some Jews, real extremely wealthy, they used to hire somebody else and to serve for them. It wasn't legal, but to graft, they bought themselves out.
Well, did the other person serve in the army under the person's name that hired them?
Right. Yeah, the same name. When they made a roll call, he answered the roll call, and that's where he got away. But there was a few cases, and there wasn't too many cases like that.
Well, so they thought it was natural that they'd go in the army. Was your father very politically conscious? You said he used to read this magazine.
Oh yeah, I remember he used to discuss politics with the chief of the police. I mean, from the town. He used to discuss politics.
Were you ever there when they had their discussions?
Well, yeah, I used to listen to them.
Do you remember anything they talked about?
Well, they didn't say nothing bad about the Tsar. That would be a terrible thing, you know. But they criticized the management in the town that it wasn't right, you see. How they prosecute some people, you know, that it wasn't right because they were poor, they couldn't defend themselves and all that. They used to criticize the administration. not the higher officials.
Well, could the chief of police be trusted?
He
What-
happened to be a very honest man. He was a very honest man. He was very impartial. He wasn't against the Jews, like some of them. But I don't know, because maybe we used to treat him nice. He used to come to us, we gave him refreshments, He invited him for tea. And he used to visit us often. He was a good friend of my father.
Would you say your father was sort of a socialist?
He wasn't a free thinker, no. Well, he was, because, well, I'll tell you, he used to go to school matter of habit, because his father was that way, they say that habit is second nature. You see, that way, but I know that religious, he wasn't very religious. Like other Jews, he was an exception. Because he wanted me to learn more Russian than Jewish. But he wanted me to read, to know how to read and write. That's the main principle. It was more a necessity to him. I should know how to read and write than how to pray, how to go deeper in praying.
Mm-hmm.
Like to be a shiva bocher, thing like that. You see, he didn't care much for that, but he wanted I should know the language well, which I did learn Jewish more than Russian. I spent more time to learn.
What language did you speak at home?
Jewish and Russian. Mostly Jewish. Because sometimes, most of the time we wanted to talk, the others shouldn't understand. Like the maid shouldn't understand, and anybody that came into the house shouldn't understand. So you talk Jewish.
Mm-hmm. So when your father became sick and he died, do you know what year that was? Approximately how old you were?
Let's see, I was about 12 years old. Because a year later, I was 13, we left, we came to the United States. But a year before I was...
Did you have a bar mitzvah in Russia?
No.
Did you have one here?
No.
And
I'll tell you, when I came here, my brother was working in the factory, you see? And he was just making a living, and he couldn't support me, I had to go to work. I was working in different... When I was 13 years old, when I came, I started to work.
okay, I'm gonna get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
When you just finally decided to leave, I suppose your father's death was a big shock.
Oh, naturally.
And what did you sell everything that you owned and sell the house?
Well, I don't know. I think the house was more under a lease than a sale, We lived in the house, it was a pretty good sized house, and then we had a few acres of land around. And we used to, and the maid used to take care of the garden, you see. And we had chickens, and we had a big garden, and some things we used to plant. And so, I don't remember exactly, I think we didn't exactly own the house. We paid so much a year for the house. It was under a lease, which many years before it was leased. Okay. So then actually we started to sell out all those personal things, the furniture and all the things that we had. We had a wagon, we had a couple of horses. Horses is like a necessity, like here a car. And in place you have to have a horse and buggy, a horse and wagon. So we had to sell everything out, and that's what we left.
And did you get enough money from selling these things to come to America?
No, we had enough money. We already had our tickets. The United States already bought a year ago.
Oh, your father had already made up his mind?
He made up his mind. It was his name on the ticket, on the reservation. He had to make a reservation way ahead.
Why was he going to leave if he had such a nice life there? I mean, he was making money and he had protection from the Cossack.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, we had very good letters from my brother that was here already. You know, the one that escaped from the war.
No, I don't know about him. Why don't you tell me about him?
Yeah, that's I told you that. I think when he came home from the service, you see, and he was and the war broke out. You see, so he didn't want to go. He didn't want to go to war. They got a matchmaker. He got married. He went to the United States.
He married someone in the United States?
No,
or
no,
someone in
no,
Russia?
no, in Russia.
But they
In
left.
the same town, and when he was already on halfway to the United States, he was called to the army, but he was already on the other side of the border.
And this was Harry?
That Harry, he was the oldest one. You see, and he came to New York, and he started to work in the factory. And he wrote us very good letters, you know, that he's very happy here and everything, and he encouraged us to come here.
So your father
So
thought
then
that
we start to make arrangements. There's no future in Russia for us, you know, that there's a better future in the United States. See? Because some Jews came back from the United States, came back because they didn't like the life. It wasn't a religious life enough for them. Those the fanatic, the religious people. But my wife wasn't too religious, you know. He thought that he would be happy.
So when you and your mother and Max and
Yeah, Max.
Dan decided to
No,
leave
Dan came together with Harry.
with Harry.
Yeah, when,
So
when
it's-
Harry is the one that married, and Dan was single, they both came together.
I see.
New
so
York.
it was your mother and
So it's
Max.
me and my mother
and you.
and Max.
Where did you go to get the boat?
On the ship, I think, let me see, I remember that in Liverpool was a place, you know, that our ship stopped there. And something I noticed, then I was held up on the way because my brother had trouble with his eyes. He was taking treatments from glaucoma. I remember this was.
From the who?
In his eyes was a disease. They call it glaucoma, a disease, that he was taking treatments there. Because they told him there that in his condition they wouldn't let him in here, in the United States. So he took treatments there. So we all was held up for that.
This was what, on Ellis Island?
No,
Outside New York?
but way before.
In Liverpool?
Liverpool.
Well, wait, where did you leave Russia from? Do you remember? How you got to Liverpool?
We went by train to Liverpool.
Oh, you went by train?
By train, yeah, until we got to Liverpool.
I
think
see.
I remember we were stationed in Liverpool on the train. We were stopped there, and we had to stay there. I don't remember. It wasn't a long time. It was maybe a month or so.
How long did the trip from Lifshutz to Liverpool take?
No, it didn't take too long. At least I don't remember. I think about a week or so.
So you stayed in Liverpool for a while?
Yeah, and then from there I think we took the if I'm not mistaken, Liverpool, some other port. It was a port that we had to land on the ship. I remember, but I don't remember. I think it was Liverpool. I remember by looking out, something for children, you know, for young boys. It was very unusual. They delivered milk with dogs. A carrot and dogs used to deliver milk in the morning. And I used to ask what they were doing. Say they were delivering milk.
So
Something I remember that was something very unusual that I noticed. That was the time I had to stay there on account of my brother.
but did they cure him?
Oh yeah, they killed him. And after we got to Ellis Island, we didn't have no trouble. You know.
Well, tell me what the crossing was like. Do you remember what the ship looked like? How many people there
It
were?
was a big ship. There was mixed people, you know, Jews and Gentiles. And it took us a long time to come. I think it was maybe, I think about 2 weeks until we got there.
About 2 weeks. Did you have to take your own food and water on the trip, or?
No, everything was included in the. You mean on the ship? No, everything was.
And was it very crowded?
Yeah, it was a pretty crowded place. And I remember I got seasick. The only one didn't get seasick is my mother. My brother was also got a little seasick, you know. But we got it over. Then we came to Ellis Island. Then my brother came to take us, you know, my both brothers came to take us down. And we moved in to his house. He took us into his house.
How long had it been since you had seen your brother, Harry, and Max?
Oh,
or Dan it was.
Yeah.
I mean, how many years?
No, it was, let's see, I don't remember this, I don't remember exactly.
Do you remember how old you were when they left for America?
When they left, I think it was, about 4 or 5 years. About 5 years. Approximately about 5 years.
And do you remember when you got to Ellis Island, is there one thing that you saw that shocked you or that you thought was very different?
No, it's because I've seen that a lot of people, there was nothing, unusual.
What about everybody speaking English in the authorities?
Yeah, yes.
Was that difficult?
Very difficult at first.
How did you communicate with them?
Well, there was a lot of Jews that I could talk.
No, but I mean to the immigration authorities.
Oh, the immigration, there were interpreters.
Oh,
They had interpreters.
So after, I'm sorry, go.
Yeah, there were interpreters. There wasn't nothing difficult because I'll tell you, of course, even now there was a lot of Jewish people there, and anything I didn't understand, they interpret. See, so we all moved into my brother in New York.
Where in New York?
In Brooklyn, New York. We moved in there. Then I started to go out looking for work. Naturally, in the Jewish center where they speak Jewish, you know. And I worked all kinds of trades. I used to work delivery in a grocery store, in a drugstore. I did all kinds of jobs, you know. Then I went and I learned a trade. I remember I paid $50 to learn a trade to be a cutter on raincoats, a cutter, you know. And I worked that trade the longest.
How old were you when you became a cutter?
Oh, I was, I think, about 16 or 17 years old.
So between the time you were 13 when you came and you did deliveries mostly?
Yeah, I was working.
Did you go to school here at all?
No, I only went to night school.
To learn English?
During the day, I had to work to make my living, you know, because my brother couldn't support us.
So you paid $50?
To learn the trade, you know, and I became a cutter. And I started to make pretty good money in that. But after I started to make good money, they went out on strike. That's what I think when I was already about 18 or 19 years old. While they were well out of strike, and I had my brother in Albany, New York. I had two brothers there in Albany. So when I left New York, I went to my brother.
Which two brothers were these?
They're Max and Dan.
They had left Brooklyn?
No, Harry, the one that was the old timer, he was working in Brooklyn. But Max and Dan were in Albany.
Why did they go to Albany?
Well, I think they had a man, one of the friends that lived in Albany, talked to me to come there.
To do what?
Well, they were house to house selling. And then one of them opened a store, merchandise, you know, general merchandise store. And they were doing pretty good. So when I came there, I still couldn't speak, of course, good English. So I went to help them out. I started, yes, when I came there, I already had a little money saved up when I was working as a cutter. I think I saved up about $800. And that was a lot of money in those days. So I went in there and the fellow recommended me to go to the factories over there to buy remnants and to sell it, to resell it. So I got together with another fellow. And we both went to the factories, we bought remnants, we started selling there. But the partner of mine I caught him stealing. While I went out for lunch, when he was selling, he didn't report to me. You see? Then I broke off.
Well, who was this man that you got into partnership with?
Well, one of them in Albany.
You didn't know him before you went there?
He was recommended to me. And I got acquainted with him. In a short time, I went with partnership with him.
Was he Jewish also?
Yeah, Jewish. But it didn't take long, and my money, half of the money I already spent. Then my brother-in-law was living in Sioux City, Iowa.
Who's?
My brother's, my sister-in-law's brother.
This was Harry's wife?
So from Albany. I'm talking from Albany because I already was in Albany.
Yeah, but...
After I left Brooklyn, you see, I went to Albany.
Right.
Because in Brooklyn they were on strike. I couldn't work there.
Right.
So there, my brother-in-law's, no, my sister-in-law's brother.
This is Harry's wife's
Not
brother?
Harry. Oh. Dan was married. He got married in Albany, New York.
I see.
So from Albany.
Who did he marry?
He married a girl, from Albany.
Do you remember her name, though? Or the family name?
Slipped out of my mind. Anyhow, I corresponded with him, and he married over there and was very successful. And he corresponded with me, and advised me to come there, to come to Sioux City, Iowa. So I went there. I left Albany.
You left your brothers?
I left my brothers and went over there.
And your mother, was your mother
my mother was
still in Brooklyn?
Yeah.
With Harry?
With Harry living. So I came to Sioux City, Iowa, and he wanted to, and then he wanted me to go in with him, but I didn't like it.
What was he doing?
In a grocery store. He had a big grocery store. And I didn't like that. So I found a job. I was seeing my money is already getting less and less. So I started to work as a shipping clerk in Sioux City, Iowa. And I roomed in a family was a relative to the one that he was married. And they wanted him to marry the girl. He was the only baker in town there. A Jewish baker. He was very fanatic, a religious man. And they had their only daughter. So a shotgun came to talk to match me up. So I didn't, she was very fanatic and I didn't like it. Meantime, my mother wrote me a letter that she has a landsman. You know what a landsman is? In San Antonio, Texas, that she knew the landsman from Russia yet. They used to correspond. And he lived in San Antonio, Texas. He says, my son, in case you don't want to stay at home here, why don't you go in a place at least where somebody that knows you there, that you have somebody that knows you. And here is the address, San Antonio, Texas. It didn't take long. I got a letter from the landsman to Sioux City and told him that I should come over there, that it's a very good place to establish, that I'll make a success here. So I did. When I came to San Antonio, I had $30 in my pocket. That's the last one that I spent.
How old were you then?
I was about 20 years old.
Do you remember what the trip was like?
Yeah, on the train.
Do you remember what it was like? Do you remember anything particular about the trip?
No, not particularly, just took the train. And I remember what depot I came into San Antonio, SP Depot.
SP?
Yeah, SP Depot. Missouri Pacific, right, in his camera. So I came here, and I moved into the landsman.
Were you speaking any English by then?
Oh yeah, I already spoke English. And my landsman's son was he was a house-to-house salesman. You know, he had two salesmen working, and he was collecting. And I used to come with him, going around in town to get acquainted. And I was very liked in the house, you know, with the landsman. And he had two daughters, you know, and everything was very smooth. But I liked the business that he was in.
What was this landsman's name?
Balin. Balin. Balin.
Can you spell that?
Balin, I think is Bailin. Balin. Anyhow, after I've been here about a month, I told my landsman that I want to go in to see if I can get some credits. I can go ahead and sell to the same thing what his son is doing.
And was he doing the same thing also?
Yeah, he was selling, riding a horse and buggy. You see, collecting, and he had two salesmen who were selling. So he says it's impossible to get credit in these stores. It takes, they have to have very good references. So I told him the references I have, because when I left Albany, I paid off everybody. I didn't owe anything. That's why I can give him reference. So while I was riding with him to get acquainted, I went in, and there was two stores, Hal Brothers and A.B. Frank, wholesalers. I went in there and I made an application for credit. And sure enough, in about 10 days, I received a letter, they want to see me. And they gave me $200 credit. And then, when I had the $200, or the Hal brothers gave the first one, then it didn't take long, the other one gave me the same credit. And then I went out on foot, house to house, and I made, I remember, 5 sales without speaking a word Spanish. I went between Spanish people. I made 5 sales. They were so surprised they couldn't believe it.
How did you do it?
I talked to them English, and actually, and they didn't. Some of them didn't understand, so they called me neighbors. They understood English, interpreters. So then, in a month after going by foot, I bought a horse and buggy for $50. I bought the horse and buggy. You can imagine what kind of a outfit I had. And now I was selling. Then I'll make this story a little short. Then, in 6 months, I had already 2 men selling for me. And I was collecting. I did the same thing that my landsman's son did. And after 18 months, a year and a half, I was drafted in the army. And I was staying then I moved out from my landsman. I moved out because they already started to press me to get married one of the girls, you know. And I didn't feel like to stay there anymore, you see. So I moved out in another house. And then after the 18 months when I was drafted, I sold out my stock. I had some stock, you know, that I was selling. And I was about ready. They gave me notice, you know. In those days, the paper showed the time when, how long it takes to be drafted, you know. There's so many, every week they were drafted. When I noticed that my time is very short, I sold out my my business, you know, my stock and my accounts. And in that time, it was a law passed that anybody is drafted didn't have to pay his bills until the war is over. But I figured this way. After I sold out everything, I had left over about over $1,500. And I went to pay off my bills. They were surprised. While I'm paying off, they say, you don't have to. But I figured this way. If I go to war and I wouldn't come back, what do I need the money for? I wouldn't need the money no how. But if I do come back, I need my credit. So I paid off everyone, and I have left about $1,500. And then I went to service. Yeah, then I transferred to the local board from San Antonio to Albany, because I went direct to Albany instead of coming to New York. Then in Albany, I was helping out my brother for a while because my number was already changed. And according to the number, I had to wait for about 2 months until I had to go. Meantime, I fell in love over there with a girl in Albany.
What was her name?
Her name is Sarah Strong. I fell in love with her, and we were engaged to be married. While I was there, I found out that she was engaged before to another boy. He was American born, and he was, I think, a lieutenant in the army. But something happened with them that they didn't marry. Anyhow, I kept company with her over there a few months in Albany. And then when my number got very close to report to the local board, I went and transferred to Brooklyn, New York, to my brother, to stay with them. I figured by transferring, I'm going to gain time.
Maybe the war would be over.
So when I transferred to the local board to Brooklyn, where my mother and brother was, so I figured I have another 2 months there. And 2 months was a long time there. So I was very happy. Meantime, I used to come to Albany to see the girl, and everything was fine. One afternoon, it was very hot at the time, outside, we were sitting outside on the porch, and I'm talking, all of a sudden the car stops, and 2 officers came into the house. They say, "Who is over here? Sam Lifshutz." He said, according to our records, he'd been already transferred twice from one local board to the other. He said, "We want to see him." So he said, "That's me." He said, "Well," he said, "we are going to give you 24 hours to pack up, to report to the local board here, because you've been transferring too long here. We want you to report to the local board." So then, then I went to the army.
Okay, well, just wait a minute. Let's backtrack a little bit, and then we'll catch up here. Let's go back to San Antonio for a few minutes. Why don't you explain what opening a line of credit meant, what it meant to you to be able to go to A.B. Frank or M. Hoff to buy things? Why was it so important to have a line of credit?
Oh, because I didn't have no money. That was important.
Yeah, but what did you buy from them?
Oh, merchandise. I bought all household things, like shirts and shirts, waist, yard goods.
So they were like a wholesale company.
It was a strict wholesale, not a retail. The 2 biggest one was A.B. Frank and Half.
And you would buy goods from them on credit.
You could buy on credit and sell them, and then sell them house to house on credit.
And why did you decide to go to the Mexican people here?
Because the majority were Mexican people. Majority of people in the area that he can sell easier. They are better customers.
And how did you used to decide on what you would charge for a shirt or a pot or a pant?
Well, they already, some others gave me an advice. They charge double the amount. That was the standard. Anything that cost you $10, you charge 20. This was a standard price already. Everybody knew that.
And did people buy on time?
On time. They pay $1 down. In those days was 25 cents a week, 50 cents a week, and $1 a week. If you sell a suit of clothes, they pay $2 down and $1 a week. That means about $50, $50 or $60.
And
anything, something cheap is 25 cents a week.
Did you charge interest on the money they
No,
owed
no,
you?
no. That was double the price, so much a week. There was no interest involved.
And how did you keep track of who owed you what?
Well, I have records, I have books.
Did you do
In
your
the
own
evening,
bookkeeping?
yeah, when I came in the evening, I kept my bookkeeping, you know. And I used to go out collecting. And I used to collect the horse and buggy, you see. And then here another unusual thing happened. When I sold out my business to go to the army, I had a horse and buggy. I had a beautiful horse, but he had asthma, you know. And one day I stopped to the post office in the plaza. I stopped my horse and I had a sign on him for sale. So when I come back, I see an old man is sitting right on a bench, right near my horse and buggy. It says to me, are you Jewish? Mr. Ayid? Yeah. You want to sell my horse and buggy? I say, yeah, it's for sale. You know, he says, I just came from Kansas City and I opened up a second-hand store and I would like to buy a horse and buggy. I need it. I came here with a son. And he goes in the army post to buy second-hand clothes from the soldiers that were drafted. So I told him, I said, listen, I want to tell you the truth. I said, my horse has asthma. So for light work is good, but the heavy work you wouldn't stand. He said, that doesn't make a difference. I got asthma too. That's why I came here for. My doctor told me to come to San Antonio.
And who was this man?
My father-in-law.
And is that how you eventually...
Later it came out.
Okay, well, we'll get into that too.
That's a long time after when I came back here.
But you told him that the horse had asthma. You didn't deceive him.
No.
Okay, well, I want to get back to your peddling. What kind of sales pitch would you give the people? You said that the first day you had 5 customers.
Yeah.
Did you have a certain spiel that you gave them?
What do you mean, sir? There's nothing, so they bought and I knocked down.
You didn't have to convince them that they needed another pot?
No, it was, I'll tell you what the most thing that I carried is like, say, curtains. Well, if the weather was cool, I had sweaters and curtains and blouses, skirts. In those days, they used to wear skirts and blouses, you know. It was in style. And, of course, they have blankets. Blankets I only had when I had my horse and buggy, you know. But in the hand, household goods mostly.
Well, you started peddling on foot.
On foot at first.
And
then
how did you carry everything?
In a month, in a suitcase, I carried light things, you know. Then I bought a horse and buggy.
After a month?
Yeah, after a month. Then I had a horse and buggy.
But you didn't have to convince people that they needed another sweater?
No, I didn't.
You didn't have any sales pitch?
No, I didn't need it because they see what it is and they bought it. You see, and then I bought a horse and buggy. Then after 6 months, I hired a salesman, and I would do the collecting.
Well, initially when you started out on foot, what would you say was the value of your inventory? About how much?
My inventory will amount to maybe about $500.
When you first started out?
Yeah, because I had credit already. I used up my credit most in 2 houses at $200 each, and then another man I remember I used to buy a sinking was the old man sinking, not this sinking, their father. I had a wholesale house. I used to buy from them. I had 3 places where I used to buy my merchandise.
Well, then when you got your cart, did your inventory increase?
Oh yeah.
About how much then?
I guess it's about maybe $1,000 or so.
Was that the average amount that the other peddlers had?
Well, I don't know.
Or was that more?
It all depends how long they've been in town, actually. Then later, I had, when I came back, from the army, that I already had a storeroom, and I used to buy bargains and buy myself, stocked up things that are cheap. At first, I didn't have an alternative. I had to buy whatever they charged.
How many people in San Antonio were selling the same kind of things?
Oh, there were lots of them.
Mostly Jewish?
Yeah, Not mostly, all of them were Jewish.
Why do you think the Jews became peddlers?
Well, I don't know. I can tell you this, the reason why.
Did you ever think
See,
of...
I tell you, of course, in because I think is their parents that came from Europe, a lot of things they couldn't do. That's all they could do is be in business. They couldn't own land, you see, like agriculture, they couldn't own land. So they were driven to be merchants. And that way, the children, going the children, seeing what the fathers were doing, they were doing the same thing.
Well, did you ever think about going into a trade here the way you had in New York to become a cutter? Did you think about that here?
I didn't like, I never liked to work for anybody, unless I was forced to that. I didn't have no capital to go in. As soon as I saved up $800 in cash, I went to Albany, and right away, I wasn't looking for a job. I wasn't looking for something to buy and sell.
What did you do with your customers who didn't pay?
I didn't pay. I didn't collect.
So, no, but I mean, did you ever repossess anything?
Well,
did you take back?
No, because it was worthless to repossess. It wasn't like furniture. You see, clothes, you can't repossess clothes.
They had already worn them.
They worn them. You can't repossess. It was a loss. That's why they charge so high profit. That's why we charge double. Say it was losses, say about 20-25% losses. I still made a pretty good profit. I end up with a good profit.
So your annual bad debts were about 20-25%?
Maybe I never figured how much, but figured even if I had 20% losses, which I didn't have it. I tell you, I found out that the Mexican people were the more honest people in comparison, like to the Anglo-Americans or colored, or black people. They were more honest. And there's a reason why they were honest. You see, in Mexico, those that came from Mexico, they were more honest than those who were born here. Because in Mexico, they used to have a law. If anybody owed money, didn't pay, they put him in jail. And these habits went in generations back. This is what I read in the history in Mexico, why it's so. So this is the reason. In the nature of Mexico used to be those that came here that were more honest than all the rest of them were. You see? So I didn't have much losses.
Well, after you went from pedaling on foot to pedaling with your horse and buggy, did business change any? Did you have to? Would you cover more territory or?
Oh yeah, my business got bigger and bigger. Then I hired another salesman. When I already been in here, when I sold out my business, I had 2 salesmen.
Were they both Jewish or were they
No,
Mexican?
Mexican. They're both Mexican. And this way I made more money because I was just collecting. I didn't sell. I was just refilling orders, used to the selling.
When did you used to make your collections? I mean, did you have a certain day of the week?
The best time was Sunday, because everybody was home. You see, I used to catch them home. And also during the week, I used to collect. But I used to work 7 days in a week. There was no 5 days like now.
So how many years was it that you were pedaling here before you moved to Albany to escape the draft?
Oh, at first, before the war, I was a year and a half here.
Just a year and a half?
A year and 18 months. Then I sold out and was dressed in the army.
And is that when you sold your asthmatic horse? Before you went to Albany?
That I sold my business,
But your horse that had asthma, then?
Yes, before. Yeah, I had to sell out everything, my merchandise, my horse and buggy and everything.
And when you went to Albany, did you feel like you were breaking the law, or did you think you were really...
No, it was legal. I came to the local board in San Antonio. I told them that before I go to war, I want to see my mother and my brothers. I got family there. It was legal. It was nothing not legal. So they gave me a transfer in writing to the local board to Albany.
I see.
And after I was there, then when I realized that my time is limited already, very pretty close, then I transferred. I want to be with my mother in Brooklyn, New York, and I transferred to the local board over there. In a way, I didn't did exactly to escape. I wanted to be there too, to be with my mother the last days. But it happened so. But it looked like I was trying to keep on transferring. But I did it legal. They gave me a transfer from Albany in writing the same thing like they gave a transfer here to Brooklyn, New York.
I understand you had a favorite saying about...
I mean, it was legal.
No, but I understand from Bernard that you had a saying, a favorite thing that you used to say, that it was never too late to die.
Yeah. To go to war was never too late. That's it.
So you were in Albany for 2 months, and there you met Sarah Strong?
No, well, I was in Albany, yeah. I met Sarah Strong.
Was she Jewish?
Yeah, she was Jewish.
But she was American.
American. Yeah, by the way, when I was already in the army, she gave me an address to a lieutenant or her friend.
Her other person to whom she was engaged?
The one she was engaged. She gave me an address to look him up there, which I did. And he was very nice. And then he treated me very nice,
Did he know you had been engaged to Sarah?
Well, I told him she was I didn't tell him exactly. I found out then that she was engaged to him. Anyhow, I guess he knew. I didn't tell him directly. So, but then when I came back, after I saw the army, and I came back direct to Albany, not to Brooklyn. And actually, we made preparations to get married and to come to San Antonio. The reason that I want to come here because I only had about $1,500. With that kind of money, everything got higher after the war. And I couldn't go in business in New York because you got to have lots of money. You got to have at least $10,000 to go into any good business. I didn't have no credit there. So I told her that after we get married, we'll come here to San Antonio. Well, she agreed. But then, when the time came close to get married, she was kind of sad. I noticed. She wasn't too happy about it. And then her friends mentioned to me that the reason she wants to marry me is because against her friend, the one that broke up the marriage, not that she was engaged. In spite of that, she wants to marry me. And I didn't like that.
But I don't understand.
You see, because she was engaged, and she was very heartbroken. She was in love with the other fellow.
Oh, you mean he dropped her?
Yeah, that's why I understood.
So she wanted to spite him.
That's right. That's exactly.
I see.
And I didn't like that. See?
So you left?
So I broke off, and I went to New York.
Okay, well, let's go back to the first time you were in Albany, and after you left Albany and went to Brooklyn, you stayed with your mother for 2 months before you went into the army?
Yeah.
What was your mother doing there then?
No, I think she was an old lady. My mother was an old woman, and now when she passed away, she was close to 90 years old.
When did she die? Do you know? Remember the year?
I see. I don't remember the year exactly. She was a sick woman.
Your brother Harry was taking care of her?
Yeah, she was. Well, we used to help her.
Had he married?
Oh, yeah, he was married. Then later his wife passed away, and he married again. He was married twice.
And was your mother living with him all this time?
All the time. And we used to help her.
And what was Harry doing in New York?
Oh, he had like a contract with a big factory to make buttonholes and suits. He worked like piecework, He had his own machines, and he used to work for a few factories making buttonholes. He was making a good living, but he wasn't wealthy. He wasn't in business exactly.
So when you finally got shipped off, where were you shipped to in the Army?
I was the first I was shipped in Camp Upton. I was trained over there. That's
Camp
training.
Upton?
Yeah, New York, Camp Upton. I was stayed there, I think, about 6 weeks, and then I went overseas.
Where'd you go to? Where'd they send you?
And overseas, let's see, I was stationed. It was in town. You know, sometimes my mind gets kind of blank.
They send you to France?
Oh yeah, I went overseas.
And what, you were in the Army, what kind of training did they give you?
They gave me regular training.
At Fort Upton?
Yeah, in Camp Upton.
Camp Upton, where was that?
In New York.
Uh-huh.
It's a camp, like Kelly Field.
And were there a lot of other Jewish people in the Army?
Oh yeah, a lot of them.
Was there any provision for people who kept kosher?
Huh?
Did they make any provisions for people who kept kosher who
No,
were in the Army?
No. First of all, I wasn't kosher. I didn't pay attention to it. But they didn't have no provisions on that. And let's see, what is the second biggest city from Paris? In France.
Marseille?
No. Marseille is the second biggest city I got. It'll come to me later.
And you went, what were you doing in France?
Then we went regular service, Then we were about to be sent in the front, you see. But it was closed in November, and the fighting was already slowed down.
November 1918?
1918, yeah. It was already slowed down, the fighting. So I didn't go actually in the front, but I was pretty close. We were already notified that in 30 days our regiment's supposed to send to the front. By the way, as soon as I got to France, I got sick.
What happened?
That it used to go around, that sickness used to go around, and it was a fever sickness over there.
Malaria?
No, malaria. Oh, I can sleep on my mind too after that. It was thousands of soldiers got sick in the hospitals. It was going around. Even in the United States, there was a lot of sick. There was a sickness going around.
Not the flu epidemic.
Like a flu.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the flu. I slipped on my mind what the name was. But and I was there for 2 weeks, and then that was delayed for me. I lost my regiment. I was assigned to the 31st Division, and I got all the training. But my 31st Division already left at the front. If I would have gotten sick, I wouldn't be here talking to you. But I read later on, I found out that my 1st Division, they killed their own soldiers by disconnecting. That the artillery were going over the infantry, and I guess the connections were mixed up, and they killed their own soldiers. They found out that they killed thousands of soldiers from their own machine guns. See? But anyhow, while I got sick, I missed my regiment. Then I was transferred to the casual battalion. A casual battalion means this way. If they send out on the front so many soldiers and they kill so many, they refill them. They took from the casual battalion, they refill them. So I was refilled by 3 times there. For soldiers they already killed in different places. They called them the casual battalion.
Casual?
Casual battalion. They refilled, or they were died,
Were you ever shot?
No.
Were you in the artillery or the infantry?
Well, I've been in 3 different machine gun company, and then in infantry and machine gun company. I was in about, you see, if you're in a casual battalion, you haven't got no chance to advance, to be an officer, because they keep on shifting you from one place to another. I was shifted from about 4 places, from one place to another, because on account me, because if you stick to your own company, you have a good chance to be advanced. But if you're in the casual battalion, then you are refilled with other companies that are missing in action, you see. So I was replaced in about 3 different places.
But all in France, was
In
this?
France, yeah.
How long were you over there? Do you remember?
I was over there about 10 or 11 months.
And were you very aware of President Wilson and what he was doing?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
What did you think of him?
That's right. Now I remember Brest.
Brest.
Brest was the place where we landed in France.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we pitched captains. It was rainy days. We pitched captains to sleep. We didn't have enough. Another thing what happened unusual. When we got there, and about a week later, they were notified that there's no food for us left for 10 days. It'll take 10 days to get our rations there. So they said, you help yourself, because we can't feed you. We haven't got no more food. So you got to help yourself. That means go stealing. But they didn't say openly, go ahead and steal. So what happened? So every soldier went out. He seen chickens in the country towns. They used to kill the chickens, and they'd cook them. And they used to go in, a big bunch of boys in the store. A few of them were buying, the rest of them were stealing. You see, in order to help themselves. So those that were arrested, naturally they used to, so they complained. They said, you told them to help ourselves. So say, we are punishing you not for stealing, they should, not to be caught next time. Be careful not to be caught. Because they had to still to exist. They didn't have no food for them.
When you had your rations, what kind of food did they give you in the Army?
Well, nothing, bacon, and beans, mostly beans.
Were they in cans?
In Kenya, yeah. Beans, and they're pretty good food. Of course, if you're hungry and you're young, you eat anything.
So you say you were aware of President Wilson while you were in the Army?
Oh, yeah.
What did you think of him?
We thought of him as a great president. So then from there, let's see. Oh, we got a furlough. What was the next big city we were? That's why I was in, I forgot the next city. It was close to Brest. Brest was a small port town. Ships used to come in there. It will come to me, what it is.
This concludes Volume 1 of the interview with Sam B. Lifshutz. The following begins Volume 2 of the interview with Sam B. Lifshutz of San Antonio, Texas. The interviewer is Ellen Robinson Epstein of the Center for Oral History in Washington, D.C. So after Brest, where did you go? Do you remember?
Everywhere?
After you left Brest in France.
Oh. Then we were traveling around from one city to the other. About 3 cities. I can't recollect exactly the names. And
you started to say that you went on furlough.
Yeah. The city right, I forgot the name. It's right next to, it's a pretty big city. You just slipped out of my mind the name. I can't remember.
Well, now you said you were aware of President Wilson. Did you know about his peace plan for the League of Nations?
Oh, yeah. It looked very, it looked like it was a very great thing. the League of Nations and everything. They were talking that this is going to be the last war.
Did you believe that?
Yeah. Well, of course, we believed. We thought it was very good thing. We didn't know it was just the beginning.
Who was the commander, the general in charge of your division? Do you remember?
Pershing, I think, the commander.
Pershing?
Pershing, I think. Yeah.
Were you aware that there was a revolution going on in Russia at the time?
Let's see, the revolution was, when was the revolution?
1917.
1917, yeah, you were aware.
How did you feel having been Russia?
They were very happy the revolution was going on, because there couldn't be any worse than it was. Because we didn't know that how it's going to turn out. You see, because the United States helped, they didn't help the communists, they helped the others. And the others were anti-Jewish, you know.
Did that bother you that the United States was helping?
We didn't know, we found out later on after we came home. Later, in the press we found out. But the majority, I guess, was for the communists on the war. Because there was two sections of communists, it was not just, it was Mensheviki and Bolsheviki. There was two. One of them was more, it's like the Chinese now and the Russians, you see. One of them went to more extreme. It's like in Jewish religion, one of them is fanatic and the other one is different, you know, like Orthodox.
Did you sympathize with the Mensheviks or the Bolsheviks?
Yeah, I sympathize very much.
Did you know who their leader was?
Well, at that time, you know, was Trotsky. I think the reason that he was expelled was mostly that he was a Jew, I think. It was the feeling, you see, that he was a Jew.
Did you think that Trotsky could have done good things for Russia?
Oh, yeah. And that's why he escaped to Mexico and he was assassinated in Mexico, you see. In those days, they were afraid he might come back. That's why they assassinated him.
So after the war was winding down, and then finally it was over and you were sent home, and you went direct to Albany to see Sarah, right?
Yes.
And then you broke off with Sarah.
That's right.
And how long were you in Albany till you broke off with her?
It wasn't too long, I think, a few months.
And so then
Then I went back to Brooklyn, New York.
And you went back to Brooklyn?
Brooklyn.
And how long did you stay in
Then
Brooklyn?
in Brooklyn, later, you know, I met another girl there. We were in company, you know.
What was her name?
Huh?
What was her name?
Barshop.
Barshop?
Yeah. Let's see.
Is that related to the bar shops here in San Antonio?
No, not relation at all. Then I had some friends over there. In fact, there was let's see. I had a call last week. I got a call from a man that came from Brooklyn, New York. That he's a San Antonio man. He said, that's what he said. He's been living here 10 years. He said, I have a regards to you. He mentioned the name. He says, who is the man that gave you regards? He says, do you remember a fellow by the name of Zipkov? When I was 20 years old, we used to go around together in New York. That was about 60 years ago. But I remember the name, though. I haven't to remember the name. Zipkov. He says, we've been together. I was on my vacation in Brooklyn. He said that he knew one of his friends that went to San Antonio, Texas. He said, I don't know if he's still in San Antonio or not. I never heard from him anymore. But if you be in San Antonio, look up in the telephone book at Lifshutz and tell him hello for me.
Is he the man you used to sleep on the roof of the tenement houses with?
No.
No. Who was that?
How did you know about him?
I know.
But not.
Who was that?
That was another fellow. That was
Why'd you used to sleep on the roofs?
It was very hot. There was no air conditioning.
So it was the only cool place.
It was about 10-story building. And at night it was so hot, so we used to take a pillow and a blanket and go up on the top of the roof and sleep over there together. It was very unusual.
So
What was his name? I just slipped out of my mind his name. Then, later, when I was ready here, I was ready to get married. I went into a store, and I see there's an auction, a man was running an auction. Running an auction, I went in to see what they were selling there. It was Alamo Plaza. Sure enough, this was the man that I used to sleep on the roof, was the auctioneer. Then the second time I met him in a restaurant. He used to be a Jewish restaurant here, and he was there, and I invited him to my wedding here.
does he still live in San Antonio?
No, he left. No, he wasn't from San Antonio. He just came here.
See.
See, he was an auctioneer. He was going from town to town. He's the one that recognized me.
So when you went back to Brooklyn after the war, after you left Sarah in Albany, you went back to Brooklyn and you met a girl named Barshop.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Well, I wasn't exactly fell in love, but I kind of liked her, you know. The one I fell in love with, the one that Sarah Strong in Albany. But then I kind of liked her, and we were talking about getting married. We weren't even engaged, but I was talking to she tried to talk me into remaining in Brooklyn. So I told her that in Brooklyn I haven't got no future. The money I've got, I can buy even a candy stand with my money. So the best future I have is San Antonio, Texas. And she agreed to come here. So I told her this way. I said, listen, let me go to San Antonio, get established again, then I'll write to her. And then she'll come here. She agreed very nicely. Everything was fine. And her sister was married to one of my friends. It was Sam Gelman, was his name. And I used to correspond with that Sam Gelman, with her
Where did
sister's
Sam
husband. He lived in New York at the time.
Oh, I see.
So he used to write to me. He said, you know, Sam, I think she started to go out. No, not yet. That was before. She says, meantime I correspond with the girl, and she was ready to come. And she already told her father and mother that she's coming here to San Antonio to marry me here. They started to cry and made like it would be a funeral. And the mother said that she'll commit suicide if she does it, and they talked her out of it. And my friend wrote me a letter. He says you have to forget about it. Meantime, another boy that he tried to date her before started to come into the house, and she was very lonesome. She didn't date nobody. She started to date him. And he was a very wealthy man. He had a factory. I think he was in some kind of merchandise factory. He had, or suit manufacturer. He was very wealthy. But she didn't like him. He kept on, he wanted to date her when I was there yet, before. But she didn't like him. But then after she got lonesome, you know, and he used to come in and there, she used to start to go out with him. And then later she married him, the same man. That was, wrote me my friend, wrote me about it. Tried to forget her because she's going to marry another man.
Were you heartbroken?
Yes, for a while. He tells me like anything else, life must go on.
So you were back in San Antonio and established, and did you get another horse and cart?
Oh no, then when I came back, I could afford already to buy a car. What a car?
What kind of car?
A Maruti Ford. A Maruti Ford. And already I had hired two salesmen right away. I already knew the business. When I came in, I didn't need any money. My credit was open. They were very happy I should go in again because I paid everybody off. See? They were very happy I should go in business back, which I did. And I bought my horse and buggy and I hired two salesmen. And everything was worked up very fast. Because after I was working for about 3 years or 4 years, I went in as a sideline in the loan business, loan money, loan office. So it was combined, the business, the business and the loan office combined. Then little by little, I start to sell out. I start the business that I was doing. And I went in deeper in the loan business. Then I didn't like the loan business either. Because I didn't like the idea that I felt like the people look at me like I'm robbing somebody. They see that they borrowed, say, $100 and they had to pay $125 for it. And I didn't like that either. So little by little I started to go in doing, then I sold out my accounts. In some accounts I sold to Baumgart too, some accounts. And I went in real estate, started buying real estate, one by one, little by little I buy real estate. And then I started to buy tracts of land, subdivide them in lots, and sell them on time, the same like I would sell merchandise. And I liked it much better. First of all, the client that bought from me didn't know how much I paid for and how much I was selling for. I felt better. And there was more profit, there was no losses. You see? And I liked that business. And I was doing the most until my children came from service, came to be with me. I was doing that. I didn't like the building business at all because the building business is a headache. Because it's very hard to satisfy anybody. There's all the time complaints, and I never liked it. Because then, after my children came back, they talked me in. We should go in the building, we should open up a lumber yard and all that. But, and I don't like it even for now. I never liked it because there are too many complaints. And it's hard to satisfy people. They all the time find anything happens 5 years after the house is finished, they still complain. See? Mm-hmm. But the subdivision business I like best because they've seen what they were buying. And whenever they dropped out, I sold it for more money than I sold the first time. There's more money making in it and less trouble. There was no complaints at all. See? So that's why little by little we ended up now, because we are really still in the real estate of buying land and building. There's a combination.
Okay, well, let me get back to when you first came back and you had the Model T. And where were you living at the time when you came back from war?
When I came back, I living. I moved in a family. Let's see, no, it wasn't a family. It was an old bachelor, and he had a maid, an old lady. He had a big house in Prospect Hill, the Prospect Hill is the west side. Saunders Avenue, I remember.
What was his name?
Let's see. His name also slipped out of my mind. He's an old man. He was about 80 years old. But he had a maid, an old lady took care of the house. And I moved in there, and I had my room, and I had a stock room for my merchandise. Then he passed away, that old man. And I moved out from there, and I moved in also another family house, with the family.
It was like a rooming house.
Yeah, no, not exactly. This was a private home.
Oh,
Stein, yeah, the rest one, Miss Stein was the name, a Jewish family. But it was a man and a wife and 2 children. But they had a big home, and I rented a room, 2 rooms. One of them to keep some stock, and the other room is to me to live in. And they also had a maid there. That was my last Sunday before I got married.
Well, what happened? Who was Rabbi Solomon?
Oh, the Rabbi Solomon, he was the rabbi at that time, and he lived in the center of town, and he used to have not roomers, just to come to eat there. He had kosher meals they had there. But I used to eat there, and there was, I think, about 10 others in the same profession I was. He used to eat there, because they were very good meals, not because he kept kosher, because he was also a butcher, a combination. The meat cost him very little. So he was a butcher, and his wife was a very good cook.
How much did you have to pay to eat
50 cents.
A meal?
Yeah, that was lots of money in those days. 50 cents a meal.
But you got a good
it was
meal.
a very good meals. It was the best meals in town there.
How many years did you do that?
Well, that's quite a few years, I think, I ate over there. Yes, I think I ate there, most of the time, until, when I got married, I was 28 years old.
28?
Yeah. And when I got back to San Antonio from war, I was, I think about 22 or 23 years old. I think about 5 years it took.
Oh, so you were living with the Steins?
I didn't live there, I just ate there.
I understand, but you lived with the Steins and what other family?
Yeah. And I ate there. I ate at that Solomon. But how did you know about Rabbi Solomon?
I know everything. Okay, so then the man that you sold your horse with asthma to.
Yeah, but then later we used to come in. There was a fellow by the name of Ben Nathan. He was in the same business as I was.
And he used to eat at Rabbi Solomon's with you?
Yeah, he ate sometimes, not too much. He ate some other places too. Maybe once a week he ate there. I ate a steady, but he ate once a week.
You remember some of the names of some of the other people? Did you become friendly with any of them?
Well, let me see. Well, some of them are drifted. They didn't stay too long. They moved away. There were quite a few who moved away from here. But anyhow, Zelinsky, the one that we used to come in together, there was a girl there, Zelinsky, and this Ben Nathan, me. I think there was another one. He used to come in there. And my wife used to come in there. And there where I met my wife.
At Rabbi Solomon's?
No, at the place of Zelinsky.
At Zelinsky's house?
Yeah. No, my wife had father and mother and sisters, as a family. But I met my wife there. She used to come, she was her friend at Zelinsky. There was a family, Zelinsky, and there was a girl that my wife used to keep company with her. And so there was a gathering. We used to come in very often to that house.
At the Zelinsky house?
Yeah.
Yeah, and what?
And then I met my wife.
And what happened during your courtship?
And then I took her out. Actually, I took her out. I forgot how long it wouldn't take too long. We used to make picnics in St. Peter Park. We used to make dances and picnics over there, We used to go out.
What else did you do? Did you ever go to theater? The vaudeville theater?
Yeah. We used to go out in shows. In those days, there was no TVs. We used to go shows. Very often shows, we used to go. And
When
I
did you
used to
meet?
take her out to shows, to dances, whenever picnics, you know. And then my friend, Ben Nathan, took out another girl from our town. They used to come here for a visit, and he took her out. Sometimes we double dated, and my wife and the other one were very close friends.
What was her name?
I think Warsaw, I think they lived in.
Is that,
Yeah,
did Ben marry her?
He married her, yeah. Then she passed away. Passed away. I think from my cancer, I think, something. And they had two girls. One of them, I think, got killed by a railroad accident.
Mm-hmm. Well, what happened when you had to go meet your wife's family? Do you remember the first time you went there?
Then I had to meet the family, and I started going to their house. And then one came back to me that I saw to her father-in-law, I saw her in the house.
Did he remember you?
Yeah, very well. And actually we got very close. And in that year there was one of the biggest floods in San Antonio. And all the merchandise was wiped out. They were,
Your merchandise?
Not mine, my father-in-law's store. They had a store on Commerce Street. Everything was drowned, damaged, and he got out very poor. And when I married, before I was engaged to my wife, it wasn't exactly an engagement. I got married before engagement. I didn't need no engagement. I made it short. I had to buy her a suit of clothes to get married. So
What was your wedding like?
my whole wedding was, I think, about 10 people to the wedding. You can imagine, in her house. There was a rabbi and just very close friends.
Your mother didn't come from New York?
No, she couldn't afford to come. She was a sick woman, and she was old and sick. Nobody from my family came here because there wasn't exactly a regular wedding, you know. They didn't want no wedding. My wife's parents didn't want a big wedding because they couldn't. First of all, they couldn't afford it. See?
How did you feel about that?
Well, I didn't feel too good, but I just made the best of it. The big wedding didn't appeal to me, you know how I didn't have too many friends, you know, that to make a big wedding.
Did you have to ask your wife's father for her hand?
No.
You didn't have to go?
No, yes. Not that ceremony. It was our style.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it wasn't.
Do you remember a story? Did your wife ever tell you when she called her father to ask if it was okay to go out on a date with you?
Oh, yeah. She told me that. And
Did she tell you what her father said?
Yeah, he was very happy. He said, he's a good boy.
He said he was the best catch in San Antonio.
That's right. He was the best customer. That's the truth.
So after you got married,
remember.
did you go on a honeymoon?
Yeah. It was a short honeymoon. I couldn't afford to go for too long.
Where'd you go?
Let me see. I think it was in Austin. I think it was in Austin. It was in Austin. It was a very short honeymoon. Even by the week.
Well, when you came back, did you have a house picked out to live in?
Oh yeah, I moved in. No, we didn't buy no house. We moved in a very nice apartment.
Where was it
It
located?
was the nicest apartment on Cortland. On Cortland, I think it was Cortland, Maine. It's a beautiful apartment. In those days, you know, we paid $55. I remember like it was yesterday. $55 a month rent was lots of money.
Tremendous.
Lots of money. That was the nicest. And,
could you afford that, or were you living
no, I could
beyond?
afford it.
You could afford it by then.
Yeah. Then we went and we bought furniture. We spent about $1,500 for furniture. Very nice furniture. And we lived there, let's see, we didn't live there too long, for about 6 months. Then we bought a house here on French Place.
Why'd you move?
No, because I wanted to buy my own home. I didn't want to pay rent. And there, we lived very comfortable.
Were any of your children born there?
Yeah, they were born. Then when the children got already grown up, then we bought a two-story home.
Where was
beautiful
that?
Home at Gramercy Place, for the second home. Well, we all had 3 homes in San Antonio, since I'm in San Antonio. That was Gramercy Place, was a beautiful home. I know I sold it for $35,000, the same home. And then from there, my wife was complaining it was a 2-story house. It was kind of too hard for her to go up, to go up the stairs. And then we built the home Ivy Lane. That was the last home over here on Ivy Lane. Then here we have the swimming pool we built, a real modern home. And then I remember when we sold our home, they needed a home right away. So we moved in the Western Courts on Austin Highway.
Because the people who bought your house wanted your house immediately.
Yes, they wanted immediately the house. We sold it to an oil man.
To what?
An oil man,
Oil
a really
man?
wealthy man. It was a beautiful home, all right. So, in the meantime, we decided to build a home. We're already in the building business, you know, and we want to build a home. So, but it was no place where to move in. It was very scarce, so we moved in the Western Courts. And we felt in those courts like we were on vacation someplace. We had a maid service every day. There was a swimming pool right in the front of the courts. And then for a while, we lived over here also in downtown. We in the Callison building. We just built that. It was very nicely remodeled place, and we played for a while until our home was finished. It took, I think, about a year to build our home. It was a beautiful home. And that's all.
So what business were you in around 1920? Had you gone into the collateral loan business then?
No, later I went out. I started to go in little by little in the real estate. I started to buy in acres of land, subdivide them in lots. This was my business.
But about what time was this?
Before my children got in with me.
I see, but this was what, the 1920s or later?
Oh, later.
Was it after the Depression?
Well, no, Depression, I was by myself in Depression. That was after the Depression.
How did the Depression affect your business?
I made money in the Depression.
How did you do that?
I must tell you how. You see, I had a lot of cash money accumulated. You see, and those days, a lot of builders went out of business, you know, went bankrupt, and they made sales on real estate and houses. And I bought, there was an auction to the highest bidder. I bought blocks of houses for $400 or $500 a house, with all utilities. And I had cash accumulated, you see. And I invested in that. You see, I bought a lot of real estate. I bought houses, and some of them are I remember I bought 2 blocks houses. And some of them I rented them, some of them I sold and tripled in the profit in the Depression time.
Well, wasn't that very rare?
Because it was, well, no, it wasn't rare. All those that bought had money. Not everybody was broke. All those that went in debt was broke.
How come, wasn't your money in any of the banks that folded?
What do you mean?
Did you have any money in the banks that closed up? You didn't lose any money in the banks when they closed up?
No, I didn't lose much. Not much. I didn't lose much. Very little.
So you don't remember the depression? It wasn't tough for you?
No, not really.
What did you think of Franklin Roosevelt?
Oh, we thought that he saved the United States, Roosevelt. If not for him, we would have communism right now here. You see, in those days, I remember people standing in line for a bowl of soup. And that Hoover promised, that he was president, that Hoover. And he promised that the prosperity is on the corner. He advised all the veterans to go and sell apples. You see, and as soon as I remember his first speech when he gave Roosevelt, he said, "And I'm president, we are the richest country in the world. And I don't want to see nobody hungry." And right away, he established the WPA, and everything started to go on. He really saved the United States. He should be the best president in the history to remember.
Did most people think that the WPA was communist?
Oh no, nothing. No,
How come?
This was a life-saving for people. It's better than he told those that are out of work should sweep the streets to do something for $1 a day and earn the living, honest living, not charity. No, he saved the United States to be communistic.
Well, what did you think about?
I thought that was the best thing he ever did.
Were you upset during World War II with what he did toward the Jews? About not letting them into this country? Were you aware of that at the time?
What do you mean? No, they had a
Roosevelt.
quota. No. Every nation had a quota, so many people, because if they will let in too many people, they would take away jobs, from the country. He did the right thing.
You didn't think he should have lifted the quotas then?
No, this was the right thing to do, because he wanted to let in people little by little so it wouldn't affect the unemployment. Otherwise, those that are born here wouldn't have the jobs. You see, that was the right way to do. He was the best president we ever had. In fact, he saved this country. You see, well, that Hoover, I think they remember him as a good man. He was a terrible man. He could have. Why didn't he do the same thing that Roosevelt did? He didn't have the guts. He was for the rich, for the millionaires, for Wall Street. He could have done the same thing. In those days, nobody pays taxes. I remember in Depression time, I made $12,000 in the Depression time. I made profit. $12,000 was a lot of money in those days. You know how much income taxes I paid? $32 income taxes. I remember I had my bookkeeper, M.B. Fried. When my bookkeeper used to come later years, I needed a bookkeeper to give a report, when people start to pay income taxes, I remember then I made, one year I had a break, I made I think $15,000, and it went into $40 income tax, $15,000 money. You know why? Because the Hoover was holding he was for the rich people not to pay taxes.
What happened to the tax system when Roosevelt came in? Did you pay a lot more?
Oh yeah, they started to increase.
Do you remember how much you paid?
No, then it was gradually, but it wasn't all of a sudden they paid double or triple. No, it was gradually, little by little. They didn't feel it. They got used to it, Anything that's a big change, you feel it, But then time was naturally, little by little, you didn't feel that you pay more and more and more. But he gave to the people a better living. If people were making more money, they could afford more. Now, he was the best president he ever had. He really saved this country, Roosevelt.
Had you always been interested in politics?
No, not much. I wasn't a politician, but of course I was interested in everything that was going on. You have to be.
Did you read the newspapers every day?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember Prohibition?
Oh, yeah.
Were you involved in any of the...
No, I was against Prohibition.
Why?
Because there was more drunkards in Prohibition time than we have now. They used to make, whiskey, confidentially, and some of them was poison. At least now, if you have a highball, it's good whiskey, It's a healthy drink. And those that used to make bootlegging, were the worst. We created a lot of, a lot of rackets in it, in bootlegging. That was the worst.
Do you remember when women were trying to get the vote?
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
I thought that was the best thing. Sure, I was for
Why?
suffrage.
I thought most men thought that it was terrible for women to vote.
Oh no, I thought it was they entitled to equal rights. They said because some women are smarter than men in politics too.
Was there ever any parades here in San Antonio?
No, not against it.
Or for it? Even?
Oh, for it, yeah. For it, yeah. I remember that. Suffragette. Suffragette, huh? It was an interesting time.
How did San Antonio change from those days till now? I mean, was it a much smaller town?
Oh, much smaller. I tell you, when I came to San Antonio, it was the biggest city in Texas. The biggest. Next was Houston, and third was Dallas. But you see, San Antonio was considered to be a military town, and they wanted to have like a vacation. They didn't want to have no factories. Anybody came here to open a factory, they discouraged him because they didn't want to smoke, the factory, the air. Excuse me. So they discouraged them. They didn't want to give them the land, and Houston invited them. They gave them a free tract of land to build a factory, and that's why Houston got all the business. Of course, San Antonio here is a military town, you see. You take away the army, and all the military towns would be a ghost town. There was nothing else here. The industry we have here doesn't amount anything for the population of the people.
What was the population in those days about?
150,000 when I came here.
Really? And now it's almost a million?
Oh, close to a million. Yeah, 150,000.
And where, the center of the city was down on Main Street and the plaza, right?
Yeah, Alamo Plaza and Commerce and Houston.
How far out did it come? I mean, it didn't come out like Loop 410. I mean, what was, if somebody lived far away from town?
I remember when I built a house over here on Ivy Lane, it was far out. I told my wife, listen, we don't want to live in the country. It's so far out. And before I looked around, you were close to town, you see? But like the city got bigger, they built more and more and more. Sometimes, I feel like to take a sightseeing in San Antonio. So, some places I've never been there. They built so far out, you see. Sometimes I get lost when I get in there. It's hard to find. They build apartments. And one thing amazes me, they build so many apartments, newer and newer, and one of them outdo the other. And where the people come from to fill them up, this I can't understand. Factories we haven't got. So what are the people doing here? This I couldn't understand. But then it was explained to me that she take a family. The children grow up. You see, they get married, they want to have a house. They don't want an apartment, they want a house. And those, the family, the children all are married, they don't need no house. Those need apartment. Like I landed up in an apartment. If anybody would tell me that I'll end up in an apartment, I thought he was crazy. I wouldn't believe it. But then, when I lived on Ivy Lane, we had a beautiful home. Of course, the children were with us after they got married. We had a swimming pool. We had a steady yardman to take the yard. And my wife wasn't too happy about this. It was too much responsibility. Because she's a perfectionist. The yardman didn't do a good job of cutting the yard. He left out some places not clean. The swimming pool man that kept the swimming pool, he didn't do a good job. The swimming pool is dirty. It's not the way she would like, and she would aggravate herself. Then I got in the idea that we better sell the house. To live in it costs a lot of money to keep it up. And not to be happy, there's no sense to have a house just for two people. Because it was a lot of responsibility to keep it up. So then we sold the house. And you know who was the best salesman that sold the house? My wife. she met a woman in the beauty shop. They did it in the house and they passed by our house. They admired our house all the time. But she didn't know to who it belonged to. At that time, we made up our mind to sell. And she's the one they invited him to come here to see it. And in 30 days, we had a household.
Well, back to San Antonio, when you first came here, were the Mexicans still wearing the white pajamas? You know, the white, rather than American business suits, were they wearing the Mexican white outfits they used to wear in the early days?
In the early days, what do you mean
the Mexican men?
Oh, the Mexican men? What do you mean right in the streets you're talking about? No, they were on the white.
They weren't wearing those white pants and blue shirts?
Oh, yeah. No, that was very rare in those days. No, you couldn't see it there.
Has the Mexican population changed a lot since you got here?
Oh, yeah. Sure. Like any population, it increased the population. I think we have 50 or 60% Mexicans here.
And when you first came here, how many Jewish families were here?
I don't remember. I think we had, when I just came here, maybe 200 people, 200 members. You know, one thing amazed me, that we were on a trip to Russia. We've been in Russia 5 or 6 years ago. My wife told me about the Russian trip. I wanted to see where I was born. You know. So we got into a trip with B'nai Brit, had a trip, you know, to Russia. So we took off the trip because something unusual happened. We got in to the airport. When the plane started to go up, a wheel dropped off. We had a hard time to land. Oh, there was a lot of commotion. We thought we were going to have a wreck. Finally, we came out safe. With a lot of effort. So it was a very close escape. Some of them didn't want to go. They say it's hard luck. I said, no, I don't believe in that thing. I said, we are going. Finally, they made the repairs. We went there. Anyhow, we didn't stop. This is the most interesting trip we ever had in my life. Because I've been in Israel, I've been in South America, Rio de Janeiro, in France, and oh, by the way, I forgot before to mention you, when we landed in Brest, in France, what, okay, I slipped out again, the name of the city that we landed, that I stayed there, I had a furlough in France. Anyhow, I come back, maybe I'll come back to, I came to Russia. We've been there in 7 cities. In every city, they accepted us very nice. We were in a group, I think it was 25 people in a group. There was one doctor. How much?